All right. Okay, guys, just remembered that I hadn't done my reading for today and thought I better get on that while I still had time to upload it onto YouTube. Takes a little longer than you think to do that. So, yesterday we stopped where Harry had just begun getting letters, and they were all addressed to him, and one day it was one letter, and the next day it was 4 letters, and Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia were determined not to let Harry get his letters. And Harry was getting so frustrated because he thought, who could be sending me mail? And the ways that the letters were addressed were also kind of peculiar. The first letter was addressed to Harry, and it gave his address as Harry Potter. I think it was living in the cupboard under the stairs. And that kind of threw Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, so they discussed it, and the next day they moved Harry up to Dudley's second bedroom. Dudley was not happy about that. He pitched the awfulest fit, but it didn't seem to change Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon's mind at all. And so at this point, Harry's trying to figure out how is he going to be able to get his hands on one of these letters. So he decided that he was going to get up very, very early and sneak downstairs to get one as the postman comes. But little did he know, Uncle Vernon had the same idea, and he was asleep at the bottom of the stairs and was not at all happy with Harry for stepping on him as he came down the steps. So that's where we're picking up our story. So here we go. Well, on Friday, no fewer than 12 letters arrived for Harry. As they couldn't go through the letter box, they had been pushed under the door and slotted through the sides, and a few even forced through the small window in the downstairs toilet. Well, Uncle Vernon stayed at home again, and after burning all the letters, he got out a hammer and nails and boarded up the cracks around the front and back doors so no one could go out. Well, he hummed tiptoe through the tulips as he worked, and jumped at small noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of the 24 eggs that their very confused milkman had handed Aunt Petunia through the living room window, while Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls to the post office and the dairy, trying to find someone to complain to. Well, Aunt Petunia shredded the letters in her food mixer. Who on earth wants to talk to you this badly? Dudley asked Harry in amazement. Well, on Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table looking tired and rather ill, but happy. No post on Sundays, he reminded them happily as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. No darn letters today. And something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply on the back of the head. Next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt into the air trying to catch one. Out! Out! Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him into the hall. And when Aunt Petunia and Dudley had run out with their arms over their faces, Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. Well, they could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off the walls and the floor. That does it, said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly, but pulling great tufts out of his mustache at the same time. I want you all back here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We're going away. Just pack some clothes, no arguments. Well, he looked so dangerous with half his mustache missing that no one dared argue. 10 minutes later, they had wrenched their way through the boarded up doors and were in the car, speeding towards the motorway. Well, Dudley was sniffling in the back seat. His father had hit him round the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, videos, and computer in a sports bag. They drove and they drove. Well, even Aunt Petunia didn't dare ask where they were going, and every now and then Uncle Vernon would take a sharp turning and drive in the opposite direction for a while. "Gonna shake 'em off, gonna shake 'em off," he would mutter whenever he did this. Well, they didn't stop to eat or drink all day, and by nightfall, Dudley was howling. Well, he'd never had such a bad day in his life. He was hungry. He'd missed 5 television programs he'd wanted to see, and he had never gone so long without blowing up an alien on his computer. Well, Uncle Vernon stopped at last outside a gloomy-looking hotel on the outskirts of a big city, and Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp, musty sheets. Dudley snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting on the windowsill, staring down at the lights of passing cars and just wondering. Well, the next morning they ate stale cornflakes and cold tinned tomatoes on toast for breakfast. Sounds disgusting. They had just finished when the owner of the hotel came over to their table. "Excuse me, but is one of you Mr. H. Potter? Only I got about 100 of these at the front desk." And she held up a letter so they could read the green ink address. "Mr. H. Potter, room 17, Railview Hotel, Cokeworth." Well, Harry made a grab for the letter, but Uncle Vernon knocked his hand out of the way, and the woman just stared. "I'll take them," said Uncle Vernon, standing up quickly and following her from the dining room. "Wouldn't it be better just to go home, dear?" Aunt Petunia suggested timidly hours later. But Uncle Vernon didn't seem to hear her. Exactly what he was looking for, none of them knew. Well, he drove them into the middle of a forest and got out and looked around and shook his head and got back in the car, and off they went again. The same thing happened in the middle of a plow field, halfway across a suspension bridge, and at the top of a multi-story car park. "Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he?" Dudley asked Aunt Petunia late that afternoon. Well, Uncle Vernon had parked at the coast, locked them all inside the car, and disappeared. Well, it started to rain. Great drop speed on the roof of the car, and Dudley sniveled. "It's Monday," he told his mother. "The Great Humberto's on tonight. I want to stay somewhere with a television." Monday. This reminded Harry of something. If it was Monday, and you could usually count on Dudley to know the days of the week because of television, then tomorrow, Tuesday, was Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, his birthdays were never exactly fun. That last year, the Dursleys had given him a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Still, you weren't 11 every day. So Uncle Vernon was back, and he was smiling. He was also carrying a long, thin package and didn't answer Aunt Petunia when she asked what he had bought. "Found the perfect place," he said. "Come on, everyone, out." Well, it was very cold outside the car, and Uncle Vernon was pointing at what looked like a large rock way out to sea. And perched on top of the rock was the most miserable little shack you could imagine. One thing was certain, there was no television in there. "Stormcast for tonight," said Uncle Vernon gleefully, clapping his hands together. "And this gentleman's kindly agreed to lend us his boat." Well, a toothless old man came ambling up to them, pointing with a rather wicked grin at an old rowing boat bobbing in the iron-gray water below. "I've already got us some rations," said Uncle Vernon, "so's all aboard." What Uncle Vernon means by rations is, "I have us some food," is what he's talking about. Well, it was freezing in the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and a chilly wind whipped their faces. And after what seemed like hours, they reached the rock where Uncle Vernon, slipping and sliding, led the way to the broken down house. The inside was horrible. It smelled strongly of seaweed, and the wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden walls, and the fireplace was damp and empty, and there were only 2 rooms. Well, Uncle Vernon's rations, or food, turned out to be a pack of crisp, that's crackers, each, and 4 bananas. Well, he tried to start a fire, but the empty crisp packets just smoked and shriveled up. "Could do with some of those letters now, eh?" he said cheerfully. He was in a very good mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood a chance of reaching them here in a storm to deliver the post. Harry privately agreed, though the thought didn't cheer him up at all. As night fell, the promised storm blew up around them. Spray from the high waves splattered the walls of the hut, and a fierce wind rattled the filthy windows. While Aunt Petunia found a few moldy blankets in the second room and made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. And she and Uncle Vernon went off to a lumpy bed next door. And Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could and to curl up under the thinnest, most ragged blanket. Well, the storm raged more and more furiously as the night went on, and Harry couldn't sleep. Well, he shivered and turned over, trying to get comfortable, his stomach rumbling with hunger. Dudley's snores were drowned by the low rolls of thunder that started near midnight. The lighted dial of Dudley's watch, which was dangling over the edge of the sofa on his fat wrist, told Harry he'd be 11 in 10 minutes' time. He lay and watched his birthday tick nearer, wondering if the Dursleys would remember it all, wondering where the letter writer was now. 5 minutes to go. Harry heard something creak outside, and he hoped the roof wasn't going to fall in, although he might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the house on Privet Drive would be so full of letters when they got back that he'd be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was that the sea slapping hard on the rock like that? And 2 minutes to go. What was that funny crunching noise? Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go, and he'd be 11. 30 seconds. 20. 10. 9. Maybe he'd wake Dudley up just to annoy him. 3, 2, 1. Boom! The whole shack shivered, and Harry sat bolt upright, staring at the door. Someone was outside, knocking to come in. Chapter 4. The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again, and Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. Well, there was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room, and he was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what he had been in the long, thin package he'd brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause, and then smash! The door was hit with such a force that it swung clean off its hinges, and with a deafening crash, landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard, but you could make out his eyes glinting like black beetles under all that hair. Here's a picture of the man. Looks kind of creepy and scary, doesn't he? Well, the giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. And he bent down and picked up the door and fitted it easily back into its frame. When the noise of the storm outside dropped a little, and he turned to look at them all. Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could ya? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, you great lump," said the stranger. And Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. "Ah, here's Harry," said the giant. And Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "You look a lot like your dad, but you got your mom's eyes." And Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. "I demand that you leave at once, sir," he said. "You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. And he reached over the back of the sofa and jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hand and bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it into a corner of the room. Well, Uncle Vernon made another funny noise like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right." And from an inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. And Harry opened it with trembling fingers. And inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Well, Harry looked up at the giant, and he meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth. And what he said instead was, "Who are you?" And the giant chuckled. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts." And he held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. I'd not say no to something stronger if you've got it, mind you now." And his eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled crisp packets in it, and he snorted. And he bent down over the fireplace, and they couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. While the giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat: a copper kettle, a squashy package of sausage, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid which he took a swig from before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage, and nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausage from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a bit. And Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." And the giant chuckled darkly. "Your great pudding of a son don't need fattening any more, Dursley, don't worry." And he passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful. But he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. And finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know who you are." And the giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everybody does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of keys at Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. And Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them as should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Did you never wonder where your parents learned it all?" "All what?" asked Harry. "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just 1 second." Well, he had leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut, and the Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy knows nothing about anything?" Well, Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school after all, and his marks weren't bad. "Well, I know some things," he said. "I can, do math and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world. I mean, your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Well, Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursley," he boomed. And Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like "Mimble Wimble." And Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mom and dad," he said. "I mean, they're famous. You're famous." "What? My mom and dad weren't famous, were they?" "You don't know. You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. You don't know what you are, he said finally. And Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. Stop, he commanded. Stop right there. Sir, I forbid you to tell the boy anything. A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. And when Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. You never told him? Never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him? I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley. And you've kept it from him all these years? Kept what from me? Said Harry eagerly. Stop! I forbid you! Yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. And Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. I'll go boil your heads, both of you, said Hagrid. Harry, you're a wizard. Well, there was silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. I'm a what? Gasped Harry. A wizard, of course, said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower, and a thumping good. I'd say once you've been trained up a bit, with a mom and a dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter. Well, Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope, addressed in emerald green, to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea. And he pulled out the letter and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sword, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confed of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on the 1st of September. We await your owl by no later than the 31st of July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Well, questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. And after a few minutes, he stammered, What does it mean they await my owl? Galloping Gorgons, that reminds me, said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse. And from yet another pocket, inside his overcoat, he pulled an owl. A real live, rather ruffled-looking owl. And a long quill and a roll of parchment, and with his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note, which Harry could read upside down. Dear Mr. Dumbledore, giving Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well. Hagrid. Well, Hagrid rolled up the note and gave it to the owl, which clamped it in its beak, went to the door and threw the owl out into the storm. And then he came back and sat down as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. Well, Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced, but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. And Hagrid grunted. I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Said Harry, interested. A muggle, said Hagrid. It's what we call non-magic folk like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in we'd put a stop to that rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. Swore we'd stomp it out of him. Wizard, indeed. You knew? Said Harry. You knew I'm a wizard? Knew? Shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be? My dratted sister being what she was. Oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every holiday with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family. And she stopped to draw a deep breath and then went ranting on. It seemed she'd been wanting to say all of this for years. Then she met that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you. And of course, I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you. Well, Harry had gone very white, and as soon as he found his voice, he said, "Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash." "Car crash?" roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back to their corner. "How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter, not knowing his own story when every kid in our world knows his name?" "But why? What happened?" Harry asked urgently. And the anger faded from Hagrid's face, and he looked suddenly anxious. "I never expected this," he said in a low, worried voice. "I had no idea when Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting hold of you. How much you didn't know. Oh, Harry, I didn't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't go off to Hogwarts and not a knowing." And he threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. "Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you, mind. I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it." And he sat down and stared into the fire for a few seconds and then said, "It begins, I suppose, with what a person called, but it's incredible don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows." "Who?" "Well, I don't like saying the name if I can help it. No one does." "Why not?" "Well, gulping gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, was this wizard who went bad as you could go. Worse than worse. His name was..." And Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. "Well, couldn't you write it down?" Harry suggested. "Nah, I can't spell it." "All right, Voldemort." Hagrid shuddered. "Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for fellers and got them too. Some were afraid. Some just wanted a bit of his power, 'cause he was getting himself power. All right. Dark days. Harry didn't know who to trust. Didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. Well, he was taken over. Of course, some stood up to him, and he killed them. Horribly. One of the only safe places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school. Not just then, anyway. Now, your mom and dad were as good as a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you know who never tried to get them on his side before. Probably know they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade them. Maybe he just wanted them out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you all was a-living on Halloween 10 years ago. You was just a year old, and he came to your house and Hagrid pulled out a very dirty, spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. This is as good a place as any to stop. All right, not sure if we'll be posting videos next week since it's spring break. I'll ask Miss JC, and if we are, I'll see you in a few days. Bye, guys.